Hello, everyone. Hello, Alex. I'm blessed to be, I think, one of the few non-Bloomberg people having the chance to moderate a session. Some of you know me. I used to be the U.S. ambassador to the Asian Development Bank. Now with this think tank called the Milken Institute, where we're always so delighted to have your big boss from Grab has joined us. But for me, it's an honor to be here with the new president of Grab. Yeah, I know you a long time as the COO. And so this session is a little bit about AI, but it's really about a company that's doing gangbusters in Vietnam, with hopefully some lessons for people here. I don't know if we have a poll that we wanted to put up during my session. If so, put it up. People scan the QR code and share as appropriate. But we're really just going to talk. My style is really more of a conversation with you. I did go through some things with your team, but to be clear, they were like, yeah, ask them anything. So if there's something that you think, wow, what a crazy question, it's probably me who asked this. But let's just start about Grab. Grab has been really, for me, so successful. I took Grab from the airport to the hotel. I took Grab from there to here yesterday. Grab continues to evolve. Tell us a little bit first about how you evolved, I think way back, I don't know, was it My Taxi, but way back when, before it became a super app. Tell us a little bit about that progression and what brought it to this great level right now.
Sure, and thanks, Curtis, for hosting this session. Thanks, everybody, for being here to listen. I guess we're an accidental super app. We definitely didn't set out to be a super app. We set out to solve one very specific problem, which was that female passengers in Malaysian taxis could not ride safely on their own. That's literally why Grab was set up. And then we started focusing on other problems later. Once we started having a lot of drivers, we realized that drivers were not safe handling cash. So then we entered the payments business and created digital wallets. And then COVID came along. We're like, well, we've got to help people get fed. So then we started doing food delivery, et cetera, et cetera. So we've ended up, by solving a series of problems, we've ended up being a super app by default, because those things have become more and more popular. And now we find ourselves in a situation where we are responsible for the everyday earning opportunities for millions of drivers and millions of small businesses across the region. So recently, we've been spending a lot more time working with governments in the local community to understand what we can do to support economic policies and be a part of the overall economic success of Southeast Asia. So it's an accidental super app. And now we find ourselves in a position where we still want to be solving problems, but we're solving large problems with governments and other members of our community to make as big an impact as we can.
I remember it, of course, from Malaysia, from Singapore. I use it a lot in Thailand and Vietnam. And the good and bad about AI is you're never sure if you use ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok, is it really accurate? I mean, you need to do your own fact checking. But of course, I put in all these questions into AI, and so I'm comparing your answers with what they said. And when it talked about Grab's expansion, it talked about also Grab's strategy, but you're the guy who knows the strategy. It said part of their strategy is acquisition. I remember when Uber and Grab were battling it out. Anything you can say about what might happen in Indonesia? So those GoTo and things that are happening, but is the strategy also one of acquisition? It's not just accidental. Lucky you had the cash base to acquire. So tell me about acquisitions. What do we see in the paper? Is anything accurate? What's happening?
Well, we've grown largely organically across all of ASEAN. And we started the ASEAN expansion pretty early on. But there are times where acquisition opportunities help us achieve our mission faster. And we were able to kind of beat Uber, if you like, as the local champion here in Southeast Asia. And I think we managed to beat them largely because we are very focused on the diversity of Southeast Asia and being hyper-local in this region. But in the end, we ended up acquiring them as they exited. In our business, the margins are very small. And therefore, to make money, you've got to be very big. And once you're very big, you're able to provide both reliable services because you have more drivers and more merchants, so the density part is a winning formula. But you're able to also reduce prices, which then increases demand. So it is true that if you look not just in Southeast Asia, but all across the world, in the on-demand services business, the digital platform business, the bigger players tend to win in the end, and the smaller players end up being consolidated.
So what about Indonesia? There's been a big player there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that market?
We are growing very fast in Indonesia organically.
Okay.
If the opportunity to grow faster through M&A comes up, then that's something we will always look at. But the bar for that, the threshold for that, would have to be very high for us to use our shareholders' capital because the organic route is doing very well.
So, but if next week I read a story and I'll be like, "Oh, I asked you that, and you totally did not answer in that same way," is it because I haven't signed a non-disclosure agreement? Because really, the media is all over. Probably Bloomberg is all over this story, saying, "Well, maybe the government is going to give it a green light." And then, what do you say? Can't say anything.
That story has come up and gone away, and maybe 3 or 4 times over the last 6 years.
All right.
That's what I would say.
Okay, so remember that when we read something in the papers from Indonesia. But also on AI, when it talks specifically about this amazing market, Vietnam, it says you've long been the dominant player, partially because you had a lot of cash. But there's some new players in town with a lot of cash. When I think about Sun, VinFast, and when I think about VinFast, they have things that you don't yet have. Tons of charging stations, a brand also. How, as you think about this competition in this specific market, is it then, well, the parents just gotta subsidize it more? Because the AI entry on Grab Vietnam also flags accumulated losses in this market. That you just absorb those losses because now you got some real players that you're gonna face that you haven't faced this past time.
I think all of our markets, Curtis, are very competitive. Vietnam is no exception. It's also very competitive. There are players actually that have exited Vietnam as well. And there are always new players coming in. You mentioned VinFast specifically. I think what VinFast has done is it's introduced a lot of electric vehicles into the Vietnam mobility market. And I think that's great because now customers have the option of taking EVs. And I think the cost per kilometer of drivers who have EVs is lower than the cost for ICE, which is great. And that's where we as a society always want to get because you need catalysts like VinFast to actually move the critical mass and get society to shift to EVs sooner rather than later. Grab is also trying to encourage that. We have our own 2030 goals for clean vehicles, and we also have a 2040 goal for carbon neutrality. So we are very pleased with the speed with which Vietnam is moving to EV fleets. Many of the VinFast drivers, once they own their VinFast vehicles, come to drive for Grab. So in fact, we're very pleased that just this month, actually, we've launched an option on the Grab app. Hopefully you're as loyal customers as Curtis here on the Grab app. If you are, you'll see now an option for an EV choice. And it is true that many of the cars that come when you choose an EV will be VinFast cars. So I think it's great. And that will help grow the market because when the driver costs per kilometer come down, then you are able to reduce prices and then you bring in more consumers into the market.
The government, I think particularly of Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, has really, they set a specific deadline of a transition from regular, ICE, motorcycles and all, to electric. I'm thinking, is that really? I mean, it costs money to buy a motorcycle, and now government is saying, no, we can't drive that anymore after a certain date. What is your position on that? And are you going to do things for your driver partners who I don't have the money to get an e-vehicle? Will you have a new program for them to help them make that transition?
Yeah, I think it's super important that we make this transition together at the right pace. I was in Hanoi about 4 weeks ago during the typhoon, actually. There's a very serious typhoon that hit Hanoi. I was talking to some of our female drivers because we're trying to encourage more female drivers to come onto the platform. And there was one female driver called Hong, and she was a single mother. She was supporting her own family, including her mother. And she unfortunately had also become a victim to cancer. So she'd been through cancer recovery, all the time using the earnings from Grab to support her family. And when I spoke to her, she was very anxious about losing the income because she wouldn't have an EV bike. Now, I believe that it's part of our role to support the transition, so funding for those types of transitions. But if we do it too fast, there simply won't be enough bikes and there won't be enough charging stations.
Is the present timeline that's put out there too fast? Would you like more time or?
Actually, the timelines have not been finalized.
Okay.
So I think and we're in discussions with government as everybody else is to try to find the right timeline. We want also to put pressure because we think it's a good transition to make. And we're working with some of the EV suppliers like Selex Motors, Dat Bike, Vietnamese suppliers who can help to meet the demand. Because if the transition timeline is very tight, there'll be a massive surge in demand and there might simply not be enough bikes.
You know, in terms of this, like moving as technology moves us up, we were talking earlier that in Singapore, where the Milk Institute is based in Asia, there's an autonomous vehicle kind of pilot going on. What is the timeline for autonomous vehicles coming here? Do you think it's years away, given there's so much demand for like regular vehicles? What about AVs and this market?
Yeah, Grab has been studying AVs. They're actually more and more widespread as a paid service in the US and in China. And we've invested in some of the AV producers in the US and China as well, like WeRide, Vey Mobility, and May Mobility, another US player. And our goal is to look for opportunities to understand the technology early so that we can understand how it could be introduced. It's already under trial, so we're running 2 trials in Singapore. We will be happy to run trials in other markets in Southeast Asia over time. My own feeling is that the capability of the robots, so the AVs themselves, is without question. I mean, it's so powerful and these things are more and more safe, something like 10 times safer than the rest of us, human drivers. The question is, though, the cost structure and the capability to navigate complex cities like Ho Chi Minh and other of our great Southeast Asian cities, which are so dense and congested. I suspect that in terms of the cost and the complexity, it will be many years before there's a displacement of human drivers with AVs. In the meantime, they will be used primarily where there are gaps in public infrastructure, and that's the intent in Singapore. And I think that's where it will get adopted first, so that those types of public services can be available in places where they're not particularly strong at the moment.
Okay, so it'll be a long while probably for a Vietnam versus then a Singapore. Hey, we have just a few minutes left. We talked earlier, I wanted to ask and save it till the end, but you're ready for the answer, about, as we talk about this wonderful market and the markets of Southeast Asia, a word that hasn't come up yet is corruption. And so when we think about all the wonderful things we heard, Vietnam isn't alone, but when you look at World Bank, and there was even a more recent Vietnam-specific poll about what people worry about, it's corruption. How has Grab handled that challenge? Government here is trying to address it. What is Grab doing in terms of corruption as you look at this market and the region?
Well, thanks, Curtis. You're asking me all the easy questions today. Appreciate that. No, look, Grab is listed in NASDAQ. I think we're the largest cap Southeast Asia player that's listed on NASDAQ. So we have to adhere to all of the international standards on corruption. And I think the good news is that fits with our values. So it's something that we wouldn't want to do anyway. But because it's so obvious that we can't participate, we don't get approached. Mm-hmm. So then you might say, well, you have a disadvantage in markets where corruption is prevalent. And what I would say to that is, well, maybe we have to work extra hard. So our goal is to create so much value for the communities that we're in that other stakeholders and governments, etc., just want to protect us because of that. A recent economic study indicated that unemployment in Southeast Asia would be 2% higher if it weren't for Grab. So just imagine the disruption and the social unrest that would occur if unemployment was suddenly 2% higher. So I think governments and stakeholders realize that Grab is earnest about wanting to support our communities. And we have become, by accident, as I said, but we have become a very important part of the economic success of our communities. And as a tech player, maybe the largest tech player in Southeast Asia, we're also a catalyst for the development of new industries, digital industries, AI, and we are intending to be a catalyst to, here in Vietnam, where we have an R&D center, to continue to invest in the community. And we think that in the end, that is the best way of succeeding, much better than engaging in corruption.
Yeah, of course. I just want to say thank you. Can you imagine our 20 minutes is already up? On behalf of the Milk Institute, Bloomberg Businessweek, it's such a delight to have you here to see Grab represent one of the key players in this region. I hear you might be going global, but I think that's another talk. Thank you, Alex. It's so great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Curtis. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.